Welcome to this session for the Hassall Family History Association, and it's the 2nd of September of 2025. And tonight we're looking at, we're learning about Eliza Cordelia Hassall and William Walker. And I might quickly share a screen so that we can start to learn about this couple. So I've shared my screen, but stop sharing that. Did I get the PowerPoint? Let's try again. That's the document, but I need a PowerPoint. There we are. And then I'll do the actual PowerPoint, the slideshow. And I just need confirmation from the viewers that you can see that.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Yes. All right.
Yes, I can see that.
I've put together a little bit of information. There's not much information about dear Eliza Cordelia Hassall. There's much more about William Walker. But I thought if I share this, the bare bones that we have, it might help us to understand their life story. Eliza is born on the 2nd of October in 1804, and to Rowland and Elizabeth Hassall. And there's so little reference to her in the documents that we have. We know that when she's just a year old, there was an overturning of a cart, a chase, which was horse-drawn, and her mother Elizabeth broke her arm in that fall. And Eliza herself, to quote, was severely hurt. So she's a year old, and that's the first time she sort of comes into the documentation.
Graham, can I ask a question on that point? Is that all right or should I leave it until you finish?
Well, let's have a conversation then. So what is your...
Was that chassis owned by Rowland and Elizabeth? Do we know?
I don't know that, but I'm going to presume it was.
Because in my dim, dark past, I seem to remember that he had the first one in Australia. I'm not sure whether that's true or whether he was the first person without a position that had one. I'm not sure. So he was doing well by then. I'm sorry, I just wanted confirmation whether you knew or not.
No, I don't know, but I do know this episode made the newspapers. We could look this one up and it's there. But it's just one of those things, Alison, we've just got to keep hunting for those details to clarify them. The next reference that I have is when she's age 15, and it's in a letter, and this is where the transcription project that we're on starting to bear fruit. James Bradley is a former convict, and we know that Eliza and her sister Susanna were educated by James Bradley. He had a school premises that he rented from Mrs. Shelley. He thought highly of Eliza, who, to quote, pleases me much for her perseverance and has become a fine young lady. So she's 15 years old when he writes this in 1819. The next that we hear of her in any of the documentation is on the passing of her father, Rowland. Now, she's just age 16. And we know that Rowland was able to bequeath property to each of his 8 children and to his wife. So Eliza inherited Coventry Farm, 200 acres, and Dowdell's Farm of 40 acres, both in the district of Bringelly. Now we get some interesting references in a variety of documents. Now this is really interesting. This is a letter from Sarah Henry to Thomas Hassall in 1822. Eliza's 18, and I've called it Suitors. Let's read the letter first, and then I'll maybe make a comment about Sarah Henry. Sarah took the time to write a short note to Thomas Hassall, written on the 23rd of April, 1822, out of concern for Thomas's sister Eliza. She wrote, Eliza will, quote, will have an offer of marriage soon. Eliza must have been spoken of in Sarah's presence as a potential wife for the Reverend John Butler at Rangahau. Samuel Butler was about to embark on the Vansittart for Sydney to marry. Sarah continued, as you value her happiness, inquire into the youth's character. Beware, from what I have seen and heard, I am sure, without the Almighty changes his heart, he will not make a good husband. Perhaps I commit a breach of hospitality in saying so, having received kindness from the family, but the friendship I feel for yours overpowers these feelings. If I act wrong, allow the anxiety I feel for the welfare of all your dear family to plead as an excuse. Now, the next part is written by the author Marie Gillian, and it's a doctorate called The Missionary's Wayward Daughter. And so this author writes, based on her experience of marriage and men, it was clear that to Sarah that Samuel Butler was not someone the Hassall family should welcome as a husband for their sister. And historian Gunson writes in an aside, and no doubt she knew. So the backstory to this is that Sarah Henry is the daughter of one of the missionaries to Tahiti. And she and Thomas were very much, let's say, attracted to each other in the years before he went to England. He made his choices. I think he was heartbroken when he went on his travel. That's my theory. But he made the decision that he pleaded with his father to be able to marry Sarah, but she was quite a firecracker. She had a very troubled life, but she was always loyal to the Hassall family and to Thomas throughout it all. So this is about the time Thomas is coming back from England, and Sarah's giving this advice, and she's looking out for Thomas's sister in this letter. So that's a little nugget that I found in that PhD. Well, a year later, at just age 18, Eliza does marry. She marries May 14th to William Walker at St. John's Church, Parramatta. And William has arrived 2 years earlier in the colony to undertake missionary work. She was the youngest bride amongst the Hassall sisters at age 18. And, you know, it's just 3 years after her father has passed. So she's living in her mother's house and not in in any other way engaged in a profession or, you know, she's basically at home, I would say, and working with her mother. And so we read from Merrill Hope's work on the Hassalls and the Marstons of early Bathurst and O'Connell. This is a quote. Reverend Samuel Marston married Reverend William Walker to Eliza Cordelia Hassall at Parramatta. Witnesses were Eliza's brother, the Reverend Thomas Hassall, her sister Susanna, and Elizabeth Marston, the daughter of Reverend Samuel Marston. As William hadn't sought permission to marry from the Mission Society in London, he had a lot of explaining to do. Now, that's a harbinger of things to come in the Walker life. Now, William Walker writes, this quote goes on over the next page as well. Walker was becoming a nuisance for his Wesleyan brethren, and they at first thought he would be better employed in Van Diemen's Land. When it was clear that his health would make this difficult, they suggested 6 possible positions for him to occupy, all of them at some distance from Parramatta. Walker then, to everyone's surprise, married Eliza Cordelia Hassall. It is interesting to speculate whether the marriage was hastily arranged, perhaps because he felt that a married missionary would be considered to be more stable than a single one. He expressed his reasons for the marriage in a letter to the Mission Society in London. Yesterday I was married, and I hope in the Lord. This step has not been taken, but after the most mature advice and consideration. There is every reason to believe that the union is of God. The reason why I have married here is founded on the plain common truths. I gave myself to the committee to be their son in the gospel, to serve among the poor aborigines of this colony. I might have acquired a wife from England, but who she might have been, I know not. Nor is there more than one individual of all my religious acquaintance to whom I should desire to be united were I in my native land. I was led to think the individual to whom I am united, the most proper person, because she met the approbation of my brethren. She is the daughter of a clergyman of the established church. That's incorrect, actually. And a sister-in-law of one of our missionaries. She possesses a spirit of piety and devotedness, devotiousness to the cause of God. In every path which God marks out, I have all reason to believe her feet will be found. And that which is next to real piety is her attachment to the poor blacks. I pray you, dear fathers, receive her as a daughter of Abraham. So I don't have the reference as to where I found that, so we just have to live with that for the moment. But he had to explain, apparently, because probably his passage was paid out by the Wesleyan mission, and it was pretty much a mission to the Australian Aboriginals. And obviously there was concern that getting married without their agreeing to the selection might have caused some concern. Now, on this page, I have listed her children. And I'm going to come back to this information in the next couple of pages to show some interesting commingling of facts with the position of poor Eliza. So she marries 1823. The following year, on March 27, the birth of their first child, Henrietta, who eventually marries Henry Harper, and therefore the Harper connection to our family. And then a second child in 1826, a third in 1828, a fourth in 1829, a fifth in 1830, a sixth in 1833. And she dies at the age of 30 years and 9 months, giving birth to a seventh child. There's no reference to the seventh child, so it must have been stillborn. So we hear that William Walker was associated with the native institution of Blacktown. And we've just learnt that the first child was born March the 27th of 1824. On the 31st of March, the Walker's first child was born. That's incorrect. I checked our records. It was the 27th, and was baptized by their brother-in-law, the Reverend Walter Laurie, and named Elizabeth Henrietta after Mrs. Macquarie. I think it's Henrietta Elizabeth. The family then took up residence at the native institution now established at Blacktown. By 1825, 30 Aborigines were living there. The institution was closed by Governor Brisbane, who decided to amalgamate the native and orphan schools and place Walker in charge of it. So we often hear about the native institution of Blacktown, and I've often looked it up to see, well, what happened to it. It seems it was a very short existence there. And incidentally, James Hassall seems to have been a good friend of William Walker, and William Walker refers to he and James going to visit the black community there. I haven't put that in here because I need to learn more about that, but I'm quite sure that they were good friends. So really 1824 is the native institution of Blacktown, but gets closed down by the governor. And hence they moved to the Female Orphan School at Parramatta. So on the 4th of January, 1825, Walker took over the superintendence of the Female Orphan Institution at a salary of £150 a year. Governor Brisbane acknowledged that the native institution had been a success, largely due to the Walkers' efforts, and he felt that they were, quote, peculiarly adapted to engage in an enlarged sphere of tuition. But Walker had not sought the permission of the Wesleyan Committee to leave the Blacktown Aboriginal settlement, and they called him to be disciplined. And this is from Jean Stewart's work. So we're now in, that should be 1825, not 2025. And we've just got a few quotes that can be found in the literature from Merrill Hope's work. The Reverend Walter was appointed master of the Female Orphan School at Parramatta with his wife, Eliza, as matron. And then we have a PhD, 2007 PhD from the University of Sydney by Bulbach, the Female and Male Orphan Schools in New South Wales. And it has a story. Now, I've only summarized, this is not a quote, but there was a struggle for control of the Female Orphan School through 1825 because the Anglican Archbishop wanted it to come under Anglican auspices rather than Wesleyan. Okay, well, the story is that the Archbishop visited the school unannounced and found that neither William Walker nor Eliza was on the premises, and yet all the children were there. And he used this as to make a claim that they were being neglected, and he sought to oust them from that position. And we find a quote in our Hassall family book, with the Black Book, the bicentenary book. In 1825, Thomas Hassall petitioned the governor, Sir Thomas Brisbane, on behalf of his widowed mother and his sisters Eliza, Susanna, and Anne. They were co-owners of 4,000 sheep and 4,000 head of horned cattle, for which they had no pasturage of their own, either by grant or ticket of occupation. And he asked that they should be given a ticket of occupation for land on Warwick Plains, 50 miles southwest of Bathurst, on which to run their stock. Later, he petitioned Lord Bathurst for more pasturage for their 35 horses, 600 head of horned cattle, and 3,500 breeding sheep. He stated that through lack of proper pasturage the year before, up to £5,000 worth of ewes had been lost, and the losses would have been greater if they had not been able to use land granted to his brother-in-law, William Walker, for temporary pasturage. Well, what this is showing, not only the remarkable energy that Thomas had to undertake his clerical duties, as well as run his stock on behalf of not only his own family, but his mother and his sisters. But it also shows that William Walker was also in the land business by this time. So we've moved just a year ahead to 1826, and the story is the Female Orphan School at Parramatta. And we see that the second child, Susanna, is born on March the 31st of 1826. On the day before the birth, Reverend Walker resigned from the Female Orphan School. In 1826, to quote Merrill Hope, Archdeacon Scott, the school visitor, criticised the Walkers' management of the school, and after a lengthy struggle through the court to keep his good name, Walker resigned. The Reverend John S.B. Keane and his wife, who had just moved to the new parish of Bathurst, were recalled and given temporary management of the school with its 125 girls. The Reverend Thomas Hassall stood in for Keane as chaplain and school teacher at Bathurst, taking his young family to live on his grant, Lambeda at O'Connell. So that shows, well, Eliza's, she's a young woman, about 20 years of age, 21 years of age. She's got one child, a second has just arrived, and all through that year, her husband has been in litigation with the church in the courts over his position. Now, there was an article in the Sydney Gazette, 1826, at the time that they're leaving, paid tribute to William Walker and Mrs. Walker when they resigned from the Female Orphan School. And it said, the Reverend and Mrs. Walker have resigned the office of Master and Matron of the Female Orphan Institution. Vast improvements have been effected in the morals and conditions of the children since Mr. and Mrs. Walker were introduced to the institution by the late governor. Rumour proclaims that the Venerable the Archdeacon has nominated the Reverend Mr. Keane to the Mastership pro tempore. Of this we are glad, for we have no doubt that competent parties will be chosen to so responsible a trust. And then the comment by Ubas, while some improvements had certainly taken place at the school whilst the Walkers were in charge, this unqualified praise would not have been shared by the Archdeacon James MacArthur, Dr. Bowman, or the Reverend Keane, who were aware of the pitiful state of the children when the Reverend Walker, his wife, and the Broadbears left the institution on the 30th of March, 1826. So 1826, well, but 1824 up there is simply because that's when the children, well, I had to change that to maybe just take it off altogether. But because these children are still to come and there's no clear occupation, William Walker has shown the tendency to move rapidly between positions without consulting his the required authorities. And Eliza's really, sort of is carried along in this situation. And we have in our correspondence this letter, Anne Hassall, wife of Thomas, was very direct in her sharing of views, particularly with family, but I suspect also beyond family. But this is just a letter to Thomas, and she writes this, and so we get this glimpse from this, just this personal, wife to husband letter. I'm quite grieved. Mr. Walker has caused so much trouble in regard to the orphan school. When he left it, he brought away Mr. and Mrs. Broadbear and several other girls. The two former are now in jail for 3 months for leaving the place without the Archdeacon's permission. Mr. Walker says he thinks he shall be able to get the Archdeacon turned out of his place. To my father's great surprise, that's Samuel Marsden, to my father's great surprise, he spoke quite friendly when he met in the street the other day, and before he used to pass him with a bounce. He had occasion to write a note to me when he concluded, with dear sister, your most affectionate brother, which made me very indignant, for I hate insincerity. I'm sorry for Eliza and your mother, for I am afraid he will cause them much trouble in the end. Well, I put that in because of just that prescient note that Anne has put into Thomas there, fearing for the future of this household. Now, this is by a woman named de Brilliant. I don't know how to say her first name, her surname there, and maybe Spence and Sue know this book, Laurie 200th Anniversary. Well, Reverend Walter Laurie at Parramatta. I don't have a copy of that. Well, actually I do, because I've got this quote, but I don't have a physical copy. I think it must be just digital. So this passage says, controversy regarding their conduct and the meddling nature of Walker's political interests results in his departure from the church and the couple's ultimate departure from the region. So he not only leaves his mission post, but it's his departure from the church. Not long before Eliza's passing in 1835, at age 31, she and William relocate to rich grazing land on the O'Connell Plains, where they have significant holdings. William continues to dabble in political controversy, but also works as a lay preacher amongst the area's settlers. Now, this is, it says not long before Eliza's passing in 1835. So I put maybe 1834. This is the sort of thing we don't know the details until we find more information. But we know that on February the 10th of 1834, Eliza's mother, Elizabeth, Rowland's wife, Rowland's widow, Elizabeth, dies at Parramatta and leaves to Eliza 1/6 of her Burda Park property at Parramatta and a portion of the proceeds from the sale of her stock and some cash. So dear Eliza is inherited from her father and her mother. But soon after, there's illness in the family. And this is a letter from William Walker to his brother-in-law, Thomas. I have had a very sick house for the last month. Caroline, that's one of their daughters, has been lain up, but on 2 violent and sudden attacks, I have had serious apprehensions for my dear Eliza's safety. She, in fact, has never been well since the misfortune of her miscarriage. And the baby has been 5 weeks an extreme sufferer with large abscesses, which has prevented the mother from getting a regular rest. Dr. Busby has opened the abscesses and now they are doing well, and I trust now will restore both. And at the end of the letter, it's a PS. This is 13th of April, 1835, he writes, I forgot to say that Miss, and we can't, that's an indecipherable, is likely to answer our purpose extremely well. The children have made a marked improvement and love their governess, and she is attached to them. Thus, one great burden is removed both from my mind and Eliza's. So they have enough funds to have a governess, and they have need as well. Tragically, on July the 6th, Eliza dies giving birth. Calculated she's aged 30 years and 9 months. We visited her grave to the memory of Eliza Cordelia Walker, Reverend William Walker, departed this life 6 July 1835, in the 31st year of her age. Beneath this stone on earth's cold bed, an humble Christian rests her head, in sure and certain trust to rise to meet her Saviour in the skies, redeemed by his most precious blood and made an heiress of her God. It's quite a lone and desolate grave out on O'Connell Plains. So we know that, I mentioned that the close friendship between James and William Walker, it seems. But we know that James made extraordinary efforts to get to Eliza's funeral. The close relationship, Jean Stewart writes, between the members of the Hassall family was illustrated when James heard of the death of his sister Eliza Cordelia Walker at O'Connell Plains. I'm not sure why it says 1802. I have to check whether that's in her text. He set off from the Nepean property immediately, pulling himself across the punt at the river near Penrith, and climbed the Blue Mountains to Springwood, where he met his brother Thomas, who was accompanied by his son James and J.J. Howe, who had married the widow of their brother Samuel. The party continued to O'Connell Plains, a distance of 110 miles, only stopping to freshen the horses to attend his sister's funeral. Must have been an extremely sad time for the whole family. Now, a few side notes. It's known that William Walker had done his best to adopt and educate some young Aboriginal men before he was married. He'd only been a few years in the country. Remember, he came 1821, married 1823. But one of those adopted was Thomas Bennelong, known as Dicky, the son of the well-known Aboriginal Bennelong, and his third wife, Burrung. Dicky was born in 1803, christened as Thomas Walker Coke in September 1822, but he died on the 1st of February 1823, just a few weeks after his marriage to Maria Locke, Aboriginal name, Walangaya. Now, I mention this because Maria Locke was quite an extraordinary woman, well written up in history, a very able person. So she had this just a few weeks married to Dicky Bennelong. But what we know about Maria Locke is that it's in the next passage here. A few weeks since, he was married to a native girl who had been some considerable time previously maternally treated in the family of Mrs. Hassall of Parramatta. Her name is Maria. So that's one side note, which is interesting because I think Maria's got an admirable story. And it also shows the relationship that the Hassalls did have with Aboriginal people at this time. And here's another note at the end here. After his wife Eliza's death, Walker married his housekeeper, much to the disapproval of his family. He lived another 20 years. So I've shared a few notes that I was able to glean from the, scarce records that we have of the life of Eliza. I'm sure there's much more to be discovered, but that's what I've got for you in this presentation this evening. So open up for any questions, and Alison can answer them.
I'm just wondering, you in that presentation you mentioned that the Archbishop visited, but I was under the impression there wasn't an Archbishop in New South Wales, and that Bishop Broughton was the first bishop appointed in 1829.
Look, I may have misspoken. I might have meant to say archdeacon.
Right.
But they're the sort of details that we can check. It was
Thank
someone
you.
who had authority, who was able to.
An Anglican who had authority, yeah.
An Anglican who had authority, yeah.
You
I
mentioned.
know.
Sorry, you go.
No, and I've had a turn already. You go.
No, I was just going to make the comment on like the spouses, and you sort of wonder about the relationship. Like James, when Eliza died, like they'd only lost their mother like a year before or something like that. So, they had some grief in the family, that's for certain. But talking about Anne Marsden, wasn't she, who was Thomas's wife, wasn't she once upon a time meant to marry or be engaged to Samuel? And you sort of wasn't that the story?
But they didn't get engaged.
Samuel proposed to Anne Marsden,
and got rebuffed.
Yeah, so you sort of wonder, obviously close family, we've got plenty of letters and what have you, but you sort of wonder sometimes what all the feelings were.
Well, I think at this stage, Samuel and Jonathan had also passed at this time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And there was reference there that because Lucy, Samuel's widow, remarried
J.J. Howe, wasn't it?
J.J. Howe, and they
Yeah.
remained close friends with the family and business associates as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, they must have got over it all pretty quick. So, yeah.
William Walker's place in O'Connell was called Brisbane Grove. And I think I said to somebody, maybe my mother once, why did he name it Brisbane Grove? Governor Brisbane, of course, and they came out on the same ship. But I was told that they had a mutual, quite a passion for astronomy. Has anybody heard that before? Just wondering whether it's true.
No, I think you probably know quite a few little bits of information like that, Alison, that we don't yet know.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that there's much written about William Walker that we just simply haven't done the homework yet. And I think that the direction this is going is that by establishing this maybe the second generation after Rowland and Elizabeth, this is the second generation, and it's in the third generation of their children. We want to know, how do those children fare? What happened? We know that they all got married, but how do they cope? They've lost their mother early. The father remarries. Who's educating the children? What was their experience? And then when you get into the grandchildren, then you get the very interesting stories that spread out into several hundred lives to be researched. And we're really only at the beginning of understanding this whole, sort of pioneer journey out in country areas with the dangers of travel and the dangers to health. It seems such a precarious existence that they wove through, and they didn't all survive it, male and female.
So did about 4 of those 6 children reach adulthood and get married?
So of Eliza's children?
Yes.
Or we'd have to just look back at the record.
I haven't got it with me, sorry.
I think there was one who was an infant, but see, this is a 50-year life. This is a 40-year life. This is a 50-year life. This is the one that didn't survive.
Ah, right.
And this is a 60-year life. This is a 60-year life. So it was just this poor little child that didn't survive. So we can say that 5 of her 6 children survived into maturity.
All right. Yes, it's part of the family I have no idea about. I've read the story about the Mr. Walker, who was a member of Parliament, but
yeah, no, that's different, and yeah, that's a different story.
where are my Walker cousins tonight?
But I'm just thinking that, you know, Eliza had inherited properties from her father, inherited property from her mother, and yet the letters that we have in the 1830s, William Walker is struggling for finance and relying on his brothers-in-law to help with some farming deals to earn him some cash. So what happened to the wealth? What happened to the properties? We don't know. There's all these things that we haven't filled in the picture yet.
Yeah, it's a mystery.
It's a mystery, and I believe the Hassall children all got 800 acres grants in O'Connell, but looking at the plan of where all the original grants were, I believe it shows that Walker got 2,000 acres. I can double check that, but if that's the case, he did start off really quite comfortably with that. So it is interesting what happened.
And that grave of Eliza is in O'Connell, is it? O'Connell Plains? Is that the Anglican church there?
Yes.
What
and that church
saint is
was,
it?
sorry?
Which
St.
saint is
Thomas.
it? St. Thomas's O'Connell Plains.
Yes, which is interesting because it was built on Thomas Hassall's grant, and Thomas Hassall funded the building of that, well, the original church, Salem Hassall, quite generously. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, next time I'm going down there, I might have to go to O'Connell Plains. I didn't go last time.
Well, I've always said I am doing another one, Andrew, so I'll let you know.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Very, very worthwhile. So look, thank you for being part of this presentation tonight. We might end the recording there, and thank you so much for attending and asking some questions. And this helps us just move a little further along the path of understanding our distant relations in the Hassall family.